This week on the Final Dump, preseason week 2 is in the books. We are talking all about it. The latest on Jordan Love. We'll grade his performance from preseason week 2. A big week for a couple of other guys who might be on the roster bubble. We'll talk cuts. And by the way, we'll talk a little 69 too. David Bakhtiari is off the PUP list. We are back and better than ever. This is the Final Dump.
News dump.
News dump, yay!
News dump.
I mean, that's kind of a loaded question.
It's a landslide!
It's the Final Dump, presented by Game On Wisconsin. And welcome to the Final Dump. Brendan Dworzinski and Matt Freilich here with you, as always, brought to you by and hosted by Game On Wisconsin. It is good to be back, the dynamic duo together again. Matt, good to see your smiling face once more after the week off last week. Good to be back, and boy, do we have a lot to get to on the show. Thank you for tuning in on the Game On Wisconsin YouTube channel, Twitter account, and Facebook as well, or listening in wherever you get your podcasts. We've just got one preseason game left. Again, just a 3-game preseason schedule, which I think I speak for a lot of folks. As much as we miss football, we really miss real football. So we're happy that week 1 is that much closer. Just one more dress rehearsal before we get there. We'll talk about the game with the Chiefs at Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City coming up in just a little bit. Obviously, we're going to get to the biggest Packers news of the week. That is David Bakhtiari coming off the PUP list. We don't know when he'll actually play, but he is off the PUP. So we'll get to that coming up here in just a little bit. Other standouts from the game against New Orleans this past Friday and so much more. Plus, we'll cap things off with significant to some. We're looking at some defensive props today. The defense has been absolutely dominating at training camp the last couple of weeks at practices. So excited to get to some defensive props. Matt, though, you and I, this is a little bit of a rare experience because you are up there in Wisconsin. I am here in lovely northeastern Kansas in Lawrence. We don't get to have a lot of, during the week, very similar experiences. We are both fresh off of Kendrick Lamar concerts, though. You were at the one in Milwaukee. I was at the one in Kansas City. I am still riding the same high, so we got plenty of energy coming into tonight's show.
I had an absolutely busy weekend, being an absolute degenerate in a passion of mine that is Madden football. Played in some tournaments, a new game that came out like a week ago, so still trying to process it as well. Just having gone to the concert on a Thursday night, got back home and basically nerded out for a couple days on that video game. So just kind of recapping a little bit with one of my friends at work this week or on Monday here, and then also just texting you briefly about it, knowing that you had gone. It's just what an experience though, right? Like truly like the synergy, right? It's just like that Venn diagram of like, you're a Packer fan, Matt's a Packer fan, and then it like overlaps, like, but they're Kendrick fans. Like that's really truly like what I'm thinking in my head. And it was a hell of an experience. And I know it sounded like you and your wife had a great time too.
We absolutely did. He rocked the house at the T-Mobile Center in Kansas City. I know it was great up there in Milwaukee as well. The greatest, the absolute greatest. Go see him. He's on tour for a few more weeks, couple more months. Go see him. It's expensive, but who cares? Money is fake anyway. So it's good to be back. We're still riding the high from this weekend. Whatever you were up to this weekend, hope you had a fun time and hope you have a good time with us talking a little Packer football as well. We'll get to the big news in just a moment, but Matt, this is a big week, and over the last couple of years, there have been so many changes with the cut down dates during training camp. We went from incremental cuts to get down to 53. Then for a couple of years, it was just you have a 90-man roster, you make a bunch of cuts, you get down to 53. 37 guys from every roster approximately losing their jobs all at once. Now we're back to the incremental cuts from 90 to 85. And now this week, we go 85 to 80 before we get the cut down to the final 53. And I think there's a couple ways to look at this. The positive way is there's so much competition, and I think that's fair to say that at a lot of spots anyway, there is a lot of competition this year for a limited number of roster spots and a limited number of starting jobs that you're going to end up with a good candidate anyway. The downside as a fan is sometimes during camp, the super diehards among us, we get attached to certain guys, and they might not be around. It might be a former draft pick that we really were clinging to. It might be a wide receiver for a team that needs some help at that position. We thought, God, I think he's going to make it. I think he's going to make it. And then he ends up not making it, whatever it ends up being. There's a handful of guys that still need to be chopped off the roster between when this show goes live on Monday night on Game On Wisconsin and the actual deadline on Tuesday. A couple guys are going to lose their jobs, and that's always the sad part about this, but we're going to get a slightly clearer picture here in the next couple of days of what this final roster might look like. Even though the big cut is still to come, it's going to come a little bit more into focus here in the next couple days.
So bizarre getting back into the rhythm. And maybe I'm just a complete stooge for not remembering this, but like, when did they switch back now to this, like this staging cut? Was it last year? Was it previous to that? Did it have to do with COVID where they brought it back? Like, I don't recall this. So
I believe they brought it back last year, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm happy to be corrected, but I believe they went back to this last year, the incremental cuts, which I think is, I mean, I can see it both ways. On one hand, okay, you trim the roster, you give guys more reps to earn their final spot, whatever. I can also see it from the other perspective. Well, you want as many guys because you want as many lottery tickets as possible, improve your chances of finding a diamond in a rough. So I guess I get it from both perspectives. I guess the players probably like it because if you are part of the big 37-man cut, well, you're in a pool with hundreds of other guys fighting for a small number of available spots. Whereas now, at least if you get cut this week, you could still possibly go find somewhere else.
Yeah. So let's just for all intents and purposes, again, you're always right, Brendan. You're always the default right here. So you're right as last year they transitioned. So like, I 100% like this way much more. It's easier to digest as a fan. I'm sure from the player's perspective, it's easier to go through the transitional phase. For a team, it's easier to evaluate talent. You don't have to worry about, again, that influx of hundreds of players you're trying to maybe bring onto a practice squad before week one, or just it has to be absolute madness for agents, for GMs, for players, etc. So, but yeah, the Packers, I believe you have to cut 3 more down today, or being Tuesday, whenever you listen to the episode in the audio version. So, I mean, a couple things are going in the right direction for them right now. Some injuries at play, so they can throw some dudes on the pup list, etc. But other guys are balling out pretty effectively around a couple different position groups. But ultimately, 3 guys will be without a home in due time. There's been a couple surprising ones along the way. Dominic Daphne being cut. I think one of the first ones was interesting. They said today that he got an injury settlement, so that kind of checks out why he was removed from the team. But yeah, nothing too crazy. I think this far, Malik Taylor probably was one that stands out a little bit. But like, how many times can you be on a roster bubble and then finally have it burst on you, especially with the receiving depth they have? But ultimately, we're getting into that another phase, right? We're transitioning again. We're going from the second to the third preseason game. Now we're getting that roster even closer to 53.
And you make the comment about, too, the wide receiver depth. And I think to the untrained ear, you hear depth and you think, depth, this is one of the weakest wide receiver rooms in the NFL. But there's a lot of guys who are fighting for wide receiver spots 5 through 7 approximately. I mean, we know Cobb's there. We know Lazard's there. We know the rookies are there. Those are all obvious. But you throw in Winfrey. They signed Travis Fulgham, who was previously in camp with the Packers a couple years ago. They signed him back. You had Taylor before he ends up getting his settlement and getting waived. So there is a lot of competition for those final spots. Throw in Samori Toure as well, the 7th-round pick out of Nebraska. So there is a lot of competition, and there is depth. We just don't know if it's going to translate to the game that they have a lot of depth. But this is again, it's a tough time of year for a lot of guys because maybe they see their dreams coming to an end. Maybe they see it as a new opportunity. But then you get guys like a Travis Fulgham, who's been in the NFL. He's bounced around a little bit, had one good season with the Eagles a couple of years ago. I believe that was the COVID year. And when they had just absolute dog water for wide receivers, far worse than what Green Bay is dealing with right now. They bounced around, they get another chance. Or Mike Abernathy, a guy who we're going to bring up a little bit later in the show, talking about the game against the Saints, off the street. He played this spring in the USFL, and he's looking for a shot, and extra guy gets cut, you jump in and you immediately make the best of it. So it's a tough time for a lot of guys, but hey, the dream lives until you get down to those final 53-man cuts. And again, we'll get that roster a little bit more in focus here over the next 48 to 72 hours. But let's get to the guys who we know are, as long as they're healthy, on the roster for this year. And the biggest one, this is, I think, individually, probably, or at least a lot of people probably feel this way, bigger than the news from last week about Elgton Jenkins and Christian Watson and Robert Tonyan, all of them coming off the PUP list. David Bakhtiari off the PUP list is massive. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean he's ready to go full go. In fact, we know for certain that he's not full go right now, and we'll talk about his eventual return in a moment. But Matt, last week when Jacob Westendorf was on with us, he and I were talking about how, hey, really, you could not ask for better news than that trio last week coming back, unless you also threw Bakhtiari into the mix, because Elgton Jenkins is extremely important. Christian Watson, you need to get him reps. Tonyan's important to this offense. But as important as all those guys are, David Bakhtiari is maybe the best left tackle in the league still. Maybe you take him out of that spot because he hasn't played much in the last year, or I mean, barely at all within the last year. But he is that good when he is healthy. And to just get him back, to get him doing anything, given how mysterious his recovery has been and all the setbacks, I mean, it's huge for this team. Knowing that the light is at the end of the tunnel, even if it's very, very faint off in the distance, is a huge asset. And I think given what we've heard about this offensive line over training camp, it's a much needed boon as well.
100%. And it's one of the bigger mysteries on the team right now, right? Like probably second to, if not right behind, how long does Aaron Rodgers play for? Like the biggest question mark is like Bach's been gone for so long with an injury that generally is we think this 12-month timetable, and we significantly underestimate the recovery time when it comes to an ACL, whether it be physically or psychologically, what it takes to get back on the field. And he's not young anymore. Elton Jenkins is a young cat. He can come back a little bit sooner. Obviously, we've seen that, but yeah, the Bakhtiari thing, man, it's great to see. I don't know how soon we'll see him on an actual football field. I think he's having a hell of a lot of fun right now with his buddy Aaron Rodgers. They're riding around in that golf cart, blasting EDM music and doing God knows what. Like, it's just, so they're having fun. He's in good spirits, which is makes me feel good about the situation, and that he's got a positive outlook on it regardless what's happening. But yeah, it's awesome. It was really, really great news to see over the weekend, and truly just the stars kind of aligning where things need to be injury wise. I think there's a few here and there that have came up recently that we're still kind of waiting on. But as far as long-term one, I mean, there's nothing longer probably in the NFL right now than David Bakhtiari's knee injury. But as far as this team shortcoming, like it sets the team up for success, because you don't have to thrust a slightly probably below 100% Elton Jenkins out there to a spot. I mean, I'm sure he'll be 100%, but just coming back from an injury, right? Like throwing him into a left tackle right away, shuffling around this offensive line. We talked about that before we hopped on here, just some of these weird trends we'll see if offensive line, all of a sudden you snap your finger, and that's not the case anymore with the 5 they have. So I think right now I'm very focused on what it looks like when David Bakhtiari's back. And then when he does come back, what does that offensive line look back, and how does it look in between?
And we've spent so much time on this show over the last 2 seasons now talking about the best 5 and getting the most talent possible out there on the offensive line. And if you know at least that, hey, we don't know exactly when Bach will come back, and again, we'll get to that in a moment, but we don't know exactly when, but it'll be sometime in the first half of the season, or it'll be sometime around week 4 or 5, week 1, whatever it ends up being. You know, if you are a fan, because you can have a little bit of peace of mind, but you also know that if you're Adam Stenavich, if you're Matt LaFleur, if you're the rest of the offensive coaching staff, that, okay, we don't need to live with X guy or Y guy or Z guy out there when maybe we're not entirely confident in it. I mean, the biggest plus, I think, in terms of what we've actually seen on the field in the preseason so far on that offensive line has been Zach Tom, the rookie out of Wake Forest. He has been awesome, and clips of him were making the rounds on Twitter on Monday of just how good some of his pass sets have been during preseason camp. I think it was some PFF guys were talking about him, and I saw his name floating around in a couple of different places. I mean, he has looked awesome, and I brought his name up a couple weeks ago that I know a lot of draft people said, hey, watch for this guy, because wherever he ends up going, he is going to be a day 1 caliber player, even if he gets drafted in late day 2 onto day 3, whatever it might end up being. He's been a plus. The rest of the offensive line, up and down, I think is fair to say. There have been good moments. We saw a few plays in the game against New Orleans where I thought the push for the run game was excellent. That really long touchdown drive that was extended because of the roughing the passer back by the Packers' own end zone. There were some really, really nice run plays on that drive where you got a ton of push up front. There have also been some moments when you thought, okay, well, this team will not be able to run the ball all season because the defensive line is in the backfield on the handoff. So it's been, again, up and down to circle back to that point. But if you've got David Bakhtiari back in the mix, or you know within the first couple weeks of the season, or first few weeks anyway of the season, he will be back in the mix, you can say, all right, we need to live with Josh Nijman at left tackle and Jake Hansen at right guard only for a couple of weeks. Because when you get Elton Jenkins back, and we spoke with Jacob last week and said we don't know when it will be, hopefully earlier in the season. If it is, okay, great. The longer you have him, even if he's only at 80-85% of full strength because of the recovery from injury, that's still better than pretty much any alternative. Okay, that gives you more options specifically on that right side. Do you put him at tackle? Do you put him at guard? Do you want to keep Tom out there just because he's looked so good, so young? Then you can put Elgton Jenkins back at guard. Maybe that gives you some more flexibility there. Bakhtiari eventually comes back. Hey, we know this will happen within the first 4 weeks or the first 6 or 8 weeks or whatever it might end up being. Okay, can we last that long with Josh Nijman at left tackle? Probably, yeah. I mean, you lasted for most of the season last year with him at either left or right tackle. You can probably get by with that. So I think to me, it's a sigh of relief. It's also just kind of a calming sensation. That's the warm blanket on a cold night, right? Like, hey, things are not great right now, but that big burly giraffe and his gorgeous 69 jersey are going to be cuddling up with us soon, and we're going to feel a whole lot more confident about this group. And I think that's the best part of this for me, even if it's still, waiting until October or whenever for him to play. Knowing it's coming is the most relieving part of this.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you hit on Zach Tom, because that's a super important piece to this, because if they didn't feel confident with where Bakhtiari's at, or they didn't feel confident where Elgton Jenkins is at, or one of these younger guys makes some regression, you're seeing another dude climb to the top of the ladder and being one of those elite 5, right? And that's Zach Tom right now. Dude's balling out, and he's a part of that, that run push, like you discussed, like to be able to have that huge drive there. It's just, it's a great situation that they're in. Hopefully they can continue to, use this just in years and years to come, as far as this is a system that they do, bring in a veteran once in a while, draft a shit ton of guys that can play down the trenches, and continue to build the best 5. And before we get to the next topic, cool hat, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Usually when we stream the show, I go hatless because I'm at home. I am a hat guy. Every day when I leave the house, I have a hat on. Concert on Sunday night, hat. Other concert I went to on Saturday, hat. Work every day, hat. Everyday thing. So today, rocking the Super Bowl 31 Packers-Patriots New Orleans hat. It's a personal favorite of mine. White, purple. It's very pretty. If you're not watching or you're listening to the podcast, whatever it might be. So I appreciate the compliment.
And one of my favorite things now that this is a audio and video entity is that we can do the bad audio stuff where we can actually talk about things that are visual and people don't understand it. And I always get a kick out of that. I think it's funny.
It's good to have an actual visual medium now, so you can actually say, hey, look at this, and then you can actually just look at it.
Exactly.
Back to David Bakhtiari, though, because we've sort of, or at least I have been dancing around this a little bit. When is he going to get on the field? Because I think yes, and I just said this, I'm not going to completely contradict everything I just got excited about, but yes, it is exciting to know at some point, probably early-ish in the year, I would assume it's going to be within the first 6 weeks. Otherwise, you'd probably keep him on the PUP or put him back on the PUP list. You're going to get him back within the first 4-ish to 6-ish weeks. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. When does he actually come back? And this, I think, Matt, is harder than the Elgton Jenkins situation. We talked about that on last week's show that, hey, torn ACL, if he's able to come back anytime within the first few weeks of the season, I mean, that's ahead of schedule, essentially. It shows that he's a physical freak. His recovery went really well. That's awesome. And again, even if he's not his best self, he's still better than pretty much any other option. Okay. That's different than Bach, though, because he had all that other stuff that got torn up in his knee. It was not just the ACL. He's had multiple setbacks. He played 1/2 of football all last year, and that set him back. He had the cleanup this offseason as well. I think this is a more complicated timeline to prognosticate. I wish it wasn't. I wish we could say, hey, if it's not week 1, it'll be week 2. Worst case scenario, he's back week 3 to take on Tampa Bay, when you will definitely prefer to have him instead of Josh Nijman out there blocking some of those pass rushers for Tampa. But I don't really know if you can predict this at all. I mean, this might just be an incomplete grade. I wish it didn't have to be, but and not to say we've been strung along like the Packers have been lying to us, because they haven't, or that Bach has been lying to us because they haven't, but it feels like every time there's a little momentum. Oh, he's going to play in week 18 against the Lions. He's going to get out there. He's going to actually play some meaningful snaps. Then they get a bye week and maybe he'll be able to play. Well, no. Oh, well, camp. No. Well, setback again. It sucks, but I feel like we're kind of limited, or at least this is how I perceive it at this point. We're sort of limited to, he's coming. That's great. We see the light at the end of the tunnel. I just have absolutely no idea how many steps, how many meters, how many miles away that actually is.
Yeah, I don't think it's an irrational emotion to have. I do kind of feel strung along slightly. I will with some definitivity say that I don't think they will do like the test thing like they did against the Lions at the end of the year. I think they'll actually, when he's ready to go, he's ready to go. Like I really don't see any scenario where they test him for a quarter or so of regular season football. I know we got Iowa Joe chiming in here just saying like, hey, if there was a fourth preseason game, maybe they would have him in a series or two. I get that. But I don't think an extra game in preseason necessarily determines if he's going to get more snaps, because either you're comfortable with him getting snaps or you're not comfortable. And I think last year that was the test of having all the setbacks of the inflammation and the fluid buildup he had. That was something like, hey, when we get into a regular game, is this going to happen again? Because it's kind of happening right now in practice and after doing a little bit of drainage. Now you get into a real game, obviously had some discomfort, shut it down. I just don't think they're going to go through that whole rigmarole again. So once we see that he is not only activated, but actually like in a starting lineup, then I think it's time to start preparing for some, giddiness and knowing that we're gonna be able to throw the ball a little bit downfield, run the ball a little bit more effectively. But until he's really, really out there, I'm really not sure. Like he could go on the PUP list again. Like that, there is a chance that he could go on. It's nothing I want to really consider, but you said week 4. That seems like a far way away, but I guess you'd rather be safe than sorry. I really don't know what to expect. I've tried to erase any sort of logic from it because we just don't know. Like it's an injury. It's a sensitive subject with a player that's a super, super star, like probably in the top 2, him and Trent Williams, one of the best left tackles in the league. Like I just think we're gonna have to let it come to us. And I think they're not gonna rush it because like we said previously, like they have a ton of assets at that offensive line position. They can be comfortable with a couple other guys there, but to make a deep run in this thing, whether it be regular season, win the division, get a first round bye, etc., like they're gonna have Bakhtiari out there. Otherwise, their ceiling is kind of capped. We know where they're at without him when it comes to super, super high-end competitive playoff games. But like I said, just round it out. Like I think, but once we see him out there, we should be confident that's when he's going to be back on the field full time. They're not going to do this little test thing like they did last year.
I think there's a clear glass half full, glass half empty dichotomy here. The glass half empty is we have no idea when he's going to play because his knee continues to give him problems. He's had at least 3 setbacks that we know of. He's had to have multiple surgeries. It's taken this long. He's played one half of football since 2020. It's been forever. But if you want to look at this in a more positive light, and we had a listener, I want to say it was 2 weeks ago now, Matt, who brought up that, hey, there's a mental part of this too. And these guys, specifically him and Jenkins, they've got to be ready mentally because it can be tough. It can be taxing to go out there and think, is my knee going to hold up? Am I going to be able to do this? We heard from Matt LaFleur on Monday, and he said that Bakhtiari is able to practice for a second day in a row, wanted to see how his knee would respond after going through one practice. And it's transcribed by our guy, Zach Jacobson, that, hey, he's in great spirits. That's what Matt LaFleur said. And to know that he's feeling good in that regard, I think is a big step. That might seem like oh, wow, okay, big deal. I want to actually see this when he's out on the field. I want to see this against Minnesota or Chicago or Tampa or whoever else. But there is something to be said for, hey, he feels good. And, what's the line? Look good, feel good, look at whatever the line is. Same goes for offensive linemen and guys coming off of major knee injuries. You want to actually feel like you are confident. And we heard that from Elgton Jenkins. We heard it from David Bakhtiari. I think once upon a time in the history of organized, professional, commercialized sports in this country, not all that long ago, guys would say, oh, yeah, I'm totally fine, when they absolutely weren't. I have a feeling, given how pretty candid David Bakhtiari has been about this, he would tell us like, hey man, I don't know, I'm working on it, but it's not quite there. I feel like we would have heard that. If we know he is in a better state though, it's a little bit more encouraging. I'm at like 52% glass half full there. Like I'm just on that side of, okay, I can be optimistic.
No, I love that. And I everything you hit on is fantastic, especially the part about like him being super candid about it, because he wouldn't have put out that piece last year. I believe it was through Cheesehead TV. I always forget who it is, but I think it was their article just talking about his setbacks, right? And like not only to discuss an injury, a personal injury that could honestly in the long term, like really take money out of your pocket. Like truly, like I know he's not maybe gearing up for another contract, and maybe he is, but talking about an injury so candidly is one thing. Again, to also like the way the Packers run their organization and no chinks in the armor, like to not take it's not a shot at at Dr. McKenzie. Like I know people had said that, but like I don't think it's taking a shot at, because it just happens. Like, there's just some things your body doesn't, approach in the same fashion as you'd want it to on paper. So I think just the way that he went about that and spoke about it, I think you're right. Like, he would say to, whether it was Matt LaFleur, the offensive line coach, etc., like, he would say, hey, I'm not able to go. Let's give Yash a shot. Let's put, Elton out there. Let's put whoever the hell we can play left tackle out there, because why would I screw you guys over and hurt myself? So I think it's a really good point you brought up.
Let's get to some of the other guys who are on the field right now. Obviously, we are all waiting with bated breath for Bach, but also for Elgton Jenkins and the rest of these guys who are recovering to get back out there. There's guys offensively and defensively want to see back, and fingers crossed that it's sooner rather than later. As for the guys who are actually able to play this past Friday night against New Orleans in preseason game number 2, I want to give you the floor here for this next topic, because this preseason, more than it is about anything, you got to see, okay, can the offensive line hold together? Want to see some reps from as many first teamers on defense as you can. But in all reality, the majority of people paying attention, at least on a wider scale, to the Packers this preseason, they're paying attention to Jordan Love, because this is year 3 of him being on the bench. And Jacob and I talked about this on last week's show. I've made my opinion clear that I don't think he's the next quarterback of the Packers, because I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be around long enough that you don't want to give a guy who's frankly never really played a second contract. And I will say, first things first, Matt, I think Love looked a lot better in week 2 of the preseason than he did in week 1. He continued to look more confident, which is a plus. He made some throws. You and I were chatting about it before we went live tonight. He made some throws that made you think, well, damn, those are legit starting good quarterback throws that we haven't seen a lot of. He's not just relying on scrambling on third down to make his big highlight plays. So I'll leave it to you, because we didn't get to hear your opinion on the week 1 performance. Where are you standing on Jordan Love after 2 preseason games? I know you've, I think, fairly been critical of his performance in the past. How are you feeling about him through these last couple of weeks?
So number one, yep, the Niners game wasn't great. Some of it wasn't his fault, though. Let's hold Tyler Davis accountable as we need to. Now this week, I felt like, and the broadcast mentioned it too, which is great, because sometimes I don't see stuff and then they say it, and then I say stuff and they don't see it. Like, it's just, but it was like I saw it in the same time they did. There was a couple like play action bootlegs, a couple rollouts. It just seemed like he was in rhythm, in tempo, had synergy, was understanding where players are going to be, was confident in being able to turn your back to an offensive line and a D-line rush, and then be able to come around and like find a guy deep downfield. So I feel a little bit more positive about it. However, kind of what you hit on, you convinced me about this, I think, on our first show of this year, is just, or maybe second, of just like, I don't know, based off of how Aaron Rodgers is playing, if Love is going to get that chance, whether or not he is performing well or not. It just doesn't seem like the likelihood of that coming to fruition. It seems like a Jimmy Garoppolo situation. It seems like a fill in the blank of other quarterbacks this has happened to. Ultimately, I think he's made some strides. It's super unfortunate how the COVID year went, and just not getting those preseason games. It's stunted his growth, and especially for a quarterback. And you can give him all the excuses you want, really, because it kind of is an excuse, right? It's in 2022. You can get as many reps as you want in the offseason, extra snaps, in practice, go home, take some snaps in the backyard with the boys. Like, you can do some stuff to get more reps. And I think, especially when it comes to fundamentals and decision making, that's where we're really seeing the next steps, because he's still making not the best decisions, still has that gunslinger mentality in him, which needs to be broken. He's not as talented with the football, with that arm, as maybe an Aaron Rodgers or a Brett Favre that could get away with that shit. And Brett Favre truly never got away with most of it. I mean, he kind of balanced the negative with the positive. So I think at the end of the day, I've liked the progression from Jordan Love. I think you're right. Everyone nationally is probably interested in that. And if you're even a passive Packer fan, that's probably the main thing you're interested in, because you're like, hey, I know Jordan Love's a good football player. They obviously invested something. And what does this team see? And what do my fellow co-owners possibly see? Neighbors that are co-owners see in this Jordan Love kid. So you want to tune in and see what he's doing. Had a promising performance this last weekend, under, just at 50% completion percentage, no picks. I like to see that. Moved around with his legs a little bit, but ultimately, like, there were some strides that were great, but also it wasn't anything super noteworthy, because in comparison, Ian Book outperformed him, his counterpart who played for the Saints.
I think it's always, and I've repeated this a couple of times now, it's always going to be hard to judge Jordan Love when his only performance is against second stringers, and it's only in preseason games where the lights aren't very bright. I mean, for him, relatively, they are, but the lights aren't super bright. He's not going up against number ones. Like, he didn't have to throw to Alan Lazard guarded by Marshawn Lattimore in this game. He just didn't. He was throwing against second teamers. And granted, he was playing with second teamers as well. It wasn't the entire starting offensive line, certainly not the healthy entire starting offensive line for the Packers. Romeo Doubs was his number one receiver, which we love Romeo Doubs. I think pretty much all of Packers fandom at this point is at least in a place where we feel positively or optimistically about the new number 87, but that's not the same kind of roster. So it's always going to be hard to judge it. I think if you wanted to call the first preseason game a C or a C plus, because that's probably where I would fall. I mean, there was some good. There was at least one interception that wasn't his fault, one that kind of was, and one that was a genuinely bad throw. Week 2, I'd say, was closer to, B minus, B plus as far as preseason games go. He still has the moments where you think, dude, how'd you miss that? Like, what is this throw in the flat that ends up not even at a dude's feet? It's like 3 yards away. Was it a throwaway? Did the ball slip? Did you just not have a good read on it? Did you change your mind mid-throw? Like, what is that? I know Matt Schneiderman of The Athletic pointed that out too, that, he's made some wild throws, but also there's some simple stuff where you think, dude, what's going on? But I think the big splash play was there more than it's ever been, at least regularly. In the first game against San Francisco, the touchdown pass to Romeo Doubs stands out. That was a deep ball. It was a real pretty ball down the sideline. Doubs also was wide open. I mean, by NFL standards, he was butt naked, wide open near that front corner of the end zone. Every single quarterback in the league should be able to make a throw to a guy that open if you are playing and or starting in the NFL. This week, though, we saw a little bit more. There was the incomplete pass. It was a little bit out of bounds in the end zone. I believe that was going from left to right on the TV broadcast. But it was crazy when he spins around. He's getting away from the defense. He accelerates, pulls back, spins, throws it somewhat sidearm or at least 3/4 arm to the corner. It was incomplete, but you thought, damn, that's not something we've seen him do before. That's that arm talent that we've been waiting for. There was the comebacker on the near sideline moving from right to left across your vision. That was a nice throw. It was maybe a little underthrown, but it was where only his receiver could get it, and that worked. And then the deep over, that was the third throw that really reminds me or stood out to me that I wanted to make sure we got to and was a reminder of just how well he played, at least in the good moments. Juwan Winfrey running that deep over route from the right slot, and that was a perfect throw. I mean, he put it right on the money to his guy open down the field and not even super open. That was a fairly well-contested ball, and there was more good than bad, and there was more good than we had in week 1. So if we're talking about this on a big scale, Matt, like what does this mean for the future of Jordan Love? Frankly, I don't really think it means anything. I mean, it's a little more encouraging if you wanted to trade him. Like if you're trying to field offers for him, okay, maybe it's meaningful in that regard. If it's in terms of this guy's going to be the future of the Green Bay Packers, I don't think it moves the needle at all. But if we're talking just in a vacuum, was this good or bad, looking at that kind of binary, yeah, I think overall this was a good performance. It was the best one we've seen from him in a preseason game. I think that's at least fair to say. Yeah,
definitely. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I was like, I feel like this is the best performance we've seen. And yeah, it's 100%. The sample size is small. But I think, yes, I would totally agree with you. Like, it's just a matter of, can he continue to build and continue to make strides? He obviously has this season or this preseason, this training camp that we've seen. So it's just continuing to elevate his play to the next level so we can have that debate. Does he take over the starting position, whether it be this next year, whether it be 2024, God only knows when, or if they trade him away. But truly, like he made some strides, but yet I think there's just such a far way for him to go when it comes to being a starting NFL quarterback. And I know there's some shitty quarterback play in the league right now. There's some of it playing on tonight, Monday Night Football, or preseason, like when you got Geno Smith and Drew Lock out there trying to sling the rock. And then you got, Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder, who I think Desmond Ritter's probably should start for that. Like, it's tough to get a guy. And I think they might have a guy, but I don't know if he's got the athletic abilities. I just don't know if he's going to be able to make it into a pro style offense where you have to make such quick decision making, because we've yet to see that from him. But he's got the raw intangibles if they can continue to develop him.
I think it's important to point out the good while also acknowledging that there is some work to be done or that there might be some bad. I thought that in the first week when there was a lot of, oh my God, did you see that? Well, I mean,
Right.
yeah, but also did you see the throw to Amari Rogers that was a terrible pass and got picked off? Like you have to balance it out. And I think we've got David checking in from the Game on Wisconsin Facebook who says, hey, he showed some good pocket presence, climbed the pocket, made a really tough throw. Yes, that is good. And I think it's important to acknowledge those things, even if there's still obviously a long way to go. He was not, of course, the only guy who played this weekend. If he did, it probably would not have gone very well if he was trying to throw and block for himself. Who else stood out to you in this game against New Orleans? Who are some of your other top performers from week 2 of the preseason?
My boy, Tyler Goodson. Like that kid, dude. Like I cannot get enough of him because we've talked about this before, how watching a Saturday morning, Iowa v. Michigan State, Iowa versus Purdue game, you see Tyler Goodson balling out and they got to run the ball because it's, Iowa, they can't score points with, in the air. It's just, and they pick him up as a free agent and he's making the most of his opportunity just time and time again, right? With Kylan Hill gone, Patrick, there's opportunity for him to be the number 3 running back right now. And I just love it. Like, it's so fantastic for me. That's really number 1. I mean, Danny Etling had that one ridiculous play, like that touchdown, like that was insane. Winfrey looked good in his short amount of snaps. Mm-hmm. He had a couple of good catches right away. Outside of that, I mean, there's nothing that really blew off. I mean, you already mentioned him, so I'll bring him up again. Abernathy, who was the guy that they were talking about the entire game, basically leading up to that. They had just acquired him on the Packers broadcast, and then he goes and has a pretty damn good evening. But besides that, I mean, a couple guys here and there, but truly nothing like substantial. I was half watching, half listening, half doing other shit. But ultimately, like there wasn't a ton of stuff that I took away from that. But maybe you have more, maybe you have less.
No, those are pretty much the guys that stood out to me. I'll get to Goodson in a minute here. I thought Romeo Doubs, that touchdown catch he made, he clearly has some concentration issues and some hands issues that I think he needs to work on, but his ability to separate, he can still go win contested catches. And I think Jamar Chase, and for the record, I am not saying Romeo Doubs is about to be Jamar Chase. That is not what I'm saying. But I think last year, so much was made about Jamar Chase's drop problems in the preseason. And he dropped a lot of passes in the regular season, too. If I'm not mistaken, he led the NFL in dropped passes by a sizable amount last year. But you know what no one's talking about? The fact that Jamar Chase dropped passes. You know why? Because he was wide open all the time, and he's sick and awesome and one of the most fun young players to watch. So if you drop passes, yeah, that's not great, but it's more important to be able to separate. It's more important to be able to get open, to make plays. At least that's how I feel about wide receivers. Yeah, I don't like seeing guys with stone hands out there, but I do think that is a positive development. And I thought the touchdown catch from Jordan Love was really, really impressive there. Micah Abernathy, he was awesome. He's a USFL guy, so shout out to all my spring football guys out there. Power to the spring football people. That was awesome. I don't know if he's going to make the team. Packers could probably use some depth at safety or at least give him a shot. So I appreciate seeing that. That was the defensive standout of the game, I thought. I mean, he made a couple splash plays. Here's the one thing I wanted to bring up about Tyler Goodson. He's been awesome through the last couple preseason games. And I'm not going to name names, okay? But if you're on Packers Twitter, you may have seen this on Monday. I know I tweeted about it, Matt. I know you saw the tweet. Being another media person, you don't always love to be called out if you say something dumb or out of character or whatever. Have you heard any chatter about the Packers only keeping 2 running backs? Because I saw that from a certain beat writer today and thought, what? We've got our guy, Iowa Joe, who mentions he sees Goodson, running back 3. Is there a way they could possibly cut him? No one else has looked as good as him. Well, no, I think right now you're taking Goodson over Patrick Taylor. And I'm still a Kylan Hill guy. I like having him. Well, I don't like him being on the PUP list, but I like that you have that option to bring him in later, mix up the rotation, whatever it is. You've got injury depth if that's the case. But again, I saw a certain writer say, well, Amari Rogers took a handoff in practice today. That's a good thing to keep an eye on in case the Packers only keep 2 running backs. I might have missed that chatter. I want to leave that open. Maybe I'm wrong, but unless I'm missing something, Matt, I'd be very surprised if Goodson or at least someone else doesn't make this roster.
Somehow that didn't come across my face today, and I respect you a ton for being a professional. Not bringing up said name, but I'm sure I will easily find it based off of some Twitter research, or you could just tell me later. But no, I didn't see that, and that's absolutely insane. Like, especially like there's no other way to describe it. Just insane. Like that they would have 2 running backs, because it's basically going to be like Matt LaFleur actually said in quotations, 1A, 1B, 1A, 1A type situation. Like they're going to be able to run the rock effectively with both of them and get them into place. Like you're going to need someone to spell either one of them, whether it's in the passing game, you're going to need a passing back out there. Not that AJ Dillon can't do that, but you want another guy that can be more of a complement to that. Vice versa, if you want a ground and pound guy, someone can run through the tackles, I think Goodson can do that too. So like, I don't care who it is, but yeah, having 2 running backs is absolutely insane. And I think I think Tyler Goodson, based off of just the way he's participated this year in the preseason, he's made the most of his opportunities. And Iowa Joe smashed it. And why did I bring up Bill Burr? Because I saw it on Twitter that he was trending.
Okay, I was gonna say I don't think Bill Burr and Tyler Goodson sound all that similar, but okay, that's good to know. That makes a whole lot more sense. So yeah, I'm with you. I think Goodson right now is in a pretty good spot, or at least as good a spot as anyone to make the roster. Love what we've seen from him. We've heard, I know from Andy Herman had mentioned this on Twitter after the first game, that yeah, he looked good against San Francisco. I think he's looked better at practice, which I think is a big positive. We know how much Matt LaFleur puts stock into practice tape. Well, those have been the good players, and while those were the standouts from this week, Tyler Goodson, Dobbs had a nice catch, Winfrey played well, Mike Abernathy obviously had a blow-up game. Shout out to the Houston Gamblers. One guy who had a bad week for the second week in a row is tight end Tyler Davis, and he really struggled in the first game. Had a pass hit him square in the hands, pop up in the air, get intercepted. He fumbled this week. He's been missing blocks. On TV, on camera, on the preseason games, he has looked terrible. And I don't mean to besmirch the guy. I don't mean to put him down. I'm just telling you how I see it. He has looked terrible. And I know I am not the only one who feels that way. I know you feel similarly. I know most of the internet feels similarly. But then you end up with a quote like we got today on Monday from Matt LaFleur saying, quote, "We still have a lot of confidence in Tyler." Then adds his value on special teams alone is definitely noticeable. They haven't lost confidence in him because of a couple mistakes. We've heard the front office talk about how much they like this guy. And again, our guy Jacob Westendorf said, hey, look, you read between the lines here. You listen to what Matt LaFleur has to say. Tyler Davis is making this roster. And that's kind of been stuck in the back of my mind, Matt, that, okay, even though he's struggling, we've heard them talk and frankly rave about this guy for the last year or so, that they really like him. I remember that being talked about last regular season even. You combine the fact that they apparently like him, but he's been really bad in 2 preseason games, with the fact that Dominique Daphne got hurt, put on IR, got an injury settlement waive, and now is on the free market again. To be fair, that means the Packers could certainly bring him back as well. But I don't know how comfortable I feel with this tight end room when you essentially have Mercedes Lewis, who we all love, but is what he is at this point, and he fills that role well, but he can't really do anything but that role. Josiah DeGuara, who is okay. I don't think he's bad, but I don't think he's a stud either. I think he's okay. He's developed a little bit more as a pass catcher. And then Tunyon, who's the most dynamic of the tight ends, but he's coming off an injury, and we have no idea what he's going to look like. If Tyler Davis is your next best option and probably is going to see the field, I don't feel great right now about this tight end room, which you and I both know so well, Matt, has been an issue for the last couple of years now.
Yeah, and I'm glad we can call out someone on Twitter, Jacob Westendorf or Matt Schneidman, for their positive takes maybe on Tyler Davis. However, it is kind of fascinating to me that there was all this buzz over him via Andy Herman was one late last year, over the offseason as well. Everyone within the organization, it sounded like everyone was up in arms about how good Tyler Davis could be. He's going to take the role of Robert Tunyon until Robert Tunyon comes back. Well, Robert Tunyon's up to speed more than normal. He's going to take the spot of, I don't know, Mercedes Lewis and be this hybrid blocking tight end who can catch the ball. He doesn't. Yeah, okay, cool. But does it actually translate into a game? Like, you can be a practice specimen or a gym class superstar, but until you actually get on the field and produce, that doesn't mean anything. And I think there's raw talent there to be had with Tyler Davis. I really, really do. But at the end of the day, if you can't show up and be a gamer, like that's a difficult spot to be in. And there's an opportunity to be had. We talked about Tyler Goodson, not Bill Burr, making an establishment at the running back 3 spot, right? So it's like you would hope that Tyler Davis would see, hey, Daphne's gone. I can get in here and establish myself even a little bit firmer in this role, especially with DeGuara. I mean, DeGuara's been playing a ton of that where we've wanted to see him, that H-back, fullback role. Like he doesn't even really consider being as a, sometimes they split him out and maybe put him down with his hand in the dirt at tight end. But like, it's really down to a couple guys, Tyler. Like, come on and ball out. Show us what you got. We think everyone's got a lot of faith in you. I'm sure that obviously the team does too. So it's like, let's see what we can get. But right now I'm not really buying it. I'm not buying any Tyler Davis stock until I can see it in an NFL, even in a preseason game. I don't care. Just show that you can show up and compete a little bit.
I guess that's part of the fan experience, right? Is that we're not there for every rep of practice, and we get some things from the beat writers or fans who are there, or media members who might not be credentialed but are there as well, that we hear what they see, but we can't see every rep. We don't know exactly what he looks like. It doesn't feel good what we have gotten to see publicly, but I guess you trust the guys who have these jobs for a reason. But for the room as a whole here, when you still consider that Tunyon is coming back from a torn ACL, he's off the PUP list, he's doing some workouts, but we don't know exactly when he'll be back or how good he will be when he's back, if he'll have that same kind of burst. Again, Lewis is not much of an offensive playmaker, and frankly, that's being jealous, or not jealous, but generous to say, well, he's not much of one. Well, he's not one at all, frankly, at this point. Are you comfortable with DeGuara as a starting tight end in an offense that could probably use more of a tight end threat? Again, I don't think he's a bad player, but I also don't think of him as, that's my why. Like, that is my why tight end who I want to get into some route combinations and whatnot. That just doesn't really feel like his game.
No, and that's probably a player that I don't give enough praise to probably this preseason, just the way he's developed. He's had a lot of snaps in the preseason, and I think he's made some strides, which is understandable. I mean, it took him a little while, right? He had the injury setback, etc., figuring out basically this offense that LaFleur wanted him to play in. And would I feel comfortable him being a primary tight end? No, because then I think it's kind of regressing him where he needs to be in this offense to flourish. Now it's more of a ground and pound, run first offense. And I just don't see him as a stereotypical put your hand in the dirt, block a guy like Robert Tunyon could or Mercedes Lewis could. I don't see him being that. Could he be a complimentary for sure? But being a number one, or even a number two in coinciding with as a double team with Mercedes as the one, him as the two being the catcher, I just don't see that. I don't feel comfortable with that. And I would think they would probably bring someone in at that point if they had to. I just don't see him being that much of a receiver. But at the end of the day, they do have other weapons at the receiving position that can kind of play tight end, i.e. Allen Lazard.
That's an interesting point, too. And I know we've brought that up a couple of times that, well, Lazard, I mean, he's the biggest dude. He's the most built like a tight end of the other receivers. So maybe there's an opportunity for him to get snaps as that Y, as more of a tight end player. I mean, he's obviously wide receiver 1 going into this year too, but I think that's an interesting point. And maybe he does end up filling that role if DeGuara is more limited or at least can't do exactly what you were hoping him to do. We've got one preseason game left. It's coming up Thursday night at Arrowhead Stadium against the Kansas City Chiefs. I wish I could go. Unfortunately, I am not going to be there. I'll be watching on the couch like everyone else, except, and not to, again, put any play-by-play guys down because, hey, I wish I had the job doing play-by-play for the Chiefs or Packers or any NFL team. But I'm very jealous because my local broadcast, I don't get Kevin Harlan. I get the Chiefs broadcast crew, and Kevin Harlan is the absolute best. He is a Kansas Jayhawk, by the way, so shout out to the Princeton of Northeast Kansas, the University of Kansas. So I'm very jealous of all you guys up in the actual home market that get to listen to Kevin Harlan for every preseason game because he is the best. With that, though, Matt, let's get on to my favorite segment, your favorite segment, everybody's favorite segment. Bring out the cash, bring out the Johnny Manziel money signs. It is time for significant to some. We'll get to our game pick coming up in just a minute. We'll see how goofy they get for the final preseason game of the year. But, man, I've got some defensive props for you this week. We've talked offense. We talked Rodgers. We talked running backs last week. We've gotten to the wide receivers. It's time to get to some defensive players. They've been balling out during practice the last couple of weeks. I think it's time to give them some love. So I'll give you the first of our player props for today. We've got a team one as well. Player prop, Jair Alexander, hoping he'll be healthy all year this year. Over under 2.5 interceptions for Jair Alexander.
Now, the gut reaction to the typical stooge being me and you, is that seems very, very low. However, they're not going to throw on the damn ball. Like, go pick on a Eric Stokes in his second year. Go pick on a Rasul Douglas that's got to prove it for a full year. See what you can get. Man, that being said, I think I do like the caliber of this cornerback group. I do think they got a lot of dog in each and every single one of them, especially in the DB room. I think they're going to be all tested. And I don't think, I mean, obviously Jair's a tier or so above Stokes and Rasul Douglas, but at the end of the day, I think Jair just has a nose for the football. He can kind of break on some balls that shouldn't be picked, and maybe he won't get the interception. He's going to force some turnovers with the ball being popped up in a little tip drill situation. I'm going to say over. 2.5 just seems so damn low. Like, he could have 2 in one game. That seems, I mean, that would be absolutely insane, but I think he could definitely have 3. I think that's just shouldn't it's not easy based off of how many reps he's going to get with this, just where the league is at, and every team's got 3 receivers. Like, it just seems almost tough for him not to end up getting 3 picks. So I'm going to go with the over.
I think for me, my initial reaction, well, one is, oh my God, that's low. He should. He's got the skill, obviously, to do more than that.
Again, I told you that was your reaction. You're a stooge like me. You're going to go with that.
No hiding it. Degenerate, stooge, they are all 100% accurate. You're totally right about they don't want to throw the ball at him. I mean, that's what happens to elite corners, right? You don't get a ton of interceptions because they just don't throw at you. The difference for Jair is CB2 and CB3 are no slouch. Rasul Douglas, if he plays anything like he played last year, that's a really damn good third cornerback, especially a guy on the boundary. Eric Stokes showed unreal potential this past season. Loved what we saw from the Georgia Bulldog as a rookie. The thing with Alexander, too, while those guys are obviously hard to throw on in their own right, plus, I mean, Adrian Amos is one of the best safeties in the league, and I mean, Savage probably isn't as good as maybe we hoped he'd be, but he's still a fine player. He's not a bad safety by any means. That's a really damn good secondary, even if there's not a ton of depth. But Jair's going to play on the outside, and he's going to play inside. He's going to cover the slot. He's going to play on the boundary. He's going to play wherever Joe Barry and the defense feel like they need him in any given matchup because he's so adept at both. You can't quite avoid a guy 100% when he is lining up everywhere and he is such a matchup problem. So I'm with you. I'm going to go optimistic. I'm going to go with the over here. I'll say he gets to at least 3. It's going to be hard given the fact that teams will want to avoid him, but I just don't know if they can avoid him fully because of all the different places he lines up. One other Packers one to get to. Devondre Campbell is plus 2,000 to lead the NFL in total tackles. That's individual solo tackles and assisted tackles. Plus 2,000 to lead the NFL. Good bet or bad bet, Devondre Campbell to lead the league in total tackles?
Anytime you're getting 20-1 odds on your money, you gotta consider it. Now, it could be
for an all-pro, for a dude who players just named a top 50 player in the league.
Top 50 player. I do think it's significant sometimes, 20-1 on anything. It could be your buddy who wants you to get in crypto. Maybe he's got an NFT play in hand here. Maybe he just wants, he's got some sort of situation he wants you to be a part of. You always got to listen to it. Now, it might not be the most rational idea, but you got to field the conversation. So based off of last year, I just want to look here and see where he was at. He finished 7th on the list. And the thing to me with the tackles all the time is it's just so obscure. Like, dudes that lead the league, sometimes you would never predict. Like, this gentleman here, he used to be a Madden stud. He was on the Atlanta Falcons, I think. Like, he led the league last year for the Jaguars. The second guy on the list, I can't pronounce his name, Jordan Brooks, like basically the replacement now for Bobby Wagner in Seattle. Like, dudes that are just like, sometimes they're just on really shitty teams and they get a lot of tackles because their team doesn't have the ball enough.
Blake Martinez led the league in tackles at least once, didn't he? And no one in the world was like, oh my God, Blake Martinez.
Perfect example. Joe Schobert, who was just homeless he just signed to a team the other day. Like, I'm going to say, man, as much as I'd like to throw $20 in there to maybe come up 400, I'm going to say put your money elsewhere. Diversify your bonds a little bit. Maybe take a more sure hit. Maybe even take a little bit of a flyer on something a little bit different. But I'm saying that's an L. I'm not taking that 20-1 on Devondre Campbell.
Got the Wu-Tang financial advice right there. I love it. Diversify your bonds. I'm with you. Put your money elsewhere. I think the defensive line being a lot better is going to change this, because if you still had Kenny Clark and the Pips out there, okay, yeah, I would be more interested in this. But if you think Devontae Wyatt, if you think that Dean Lowry again, if you think that TJ Slayton, those guys will actually perform this year, I don't think there's going to be quite as many opportunities in that second level for tackles. One other one. This is a team prop for you. I thought this was very interesting. The Packers are plus 700, 7-1 to lead the NFL in interceptions this year. That's tied for the best odds in the league with the Buffalo Bills, who in their own right have the best safety tandem in the league and one of the best corners in Tre'Davious White. Plus 700 Packers to lead the NFL in interceptions. You like that? That's a tough one. I saw that today. And I thought, I got to get this included because this is very interesting.
I love that. Man, I don't remember which was the first one that we brought up in this segment, significant to some, which is becoming one of the more popular segments on entire Game on Wisconsin's stuff. So the boys at Lombardi's Bar, they're going to be grasping at straws for ratings soon. I'm going to say this is one of the tougher ones, like I said, that we've done. Plus 700 to lead the league in interceptions. I love the value. I love it 7-1. Let me just say that. However, based off of so many cold weather games, which you could make an argument that it's tougher to throw the ball when you do it, I just feel like the volume isn't going to be there. But maybe there's something to be said because the Bills are also up they're tied. So I don't know. It just doesn't seem like, man, do I love the Packers defense this year? I really, really do. I think there's probably other plays out there for, I don't know where the Chargers are at. I feel like that'd be a really good one. They play in a high-powered, AFC West. I would think they're a decent prop bet with that defense who is absolutely crazy. I know the producer's going to pull it up right now and tell us. But I think right now I would say I don't mind the value. If you want to take that bet and you like that, you run with that and you put some money behind that. $10 is fine. $20, you make a significant bet if you need to. But I think it's a decent play. I just don't. It's so volatile. You never know if guys are gonna, because we talked about, like, are you gonna attack Jair or not, and then who's gonna be able to make those reps behind him?
I'm gonna say no, just because turnovers and interceptions are so volatile. It's just so hard to predict. And like, is Rasul Douglas going to have 5 picks this year? Probably not. That's probably going to be his peak. Now, could Jair and Stokes get a couple more? Sure. I think that's definitely possible. Tip balls happen. Maybe more tip balls because the defensive line is going to be better. It's hard to say, but it's just so hard to predict. I don't think I could do that personally, but I mean, that's as good of a chance as anyone with that much talent in the defensive backfield. I think that's as good of a pick as anybody. Let's get to our pick for the game, Matt. Depending on where you look, some wildly different spreads for this game. I have right in front of me Chiefs -1.5. I also saw the Packers favored by multiple points in one place. I don't know why some of these websites are listing different things. It's not quite legal in Kansas yet for another 10 days, so I can't get you an official line quite yet. So give me a prediction. Packers or Chiefs, who's going to pull it away at Arrowhead Stadium coming up this week?
Who's the backup quarterback right now for the Kansas City Chiefs? I don't even know this. I know you should. You have to know this. Who you're thinking? I actually thought I was on mute again, so that's why I jumped back into my screen. Who's the back? Because that's really the only thing that matters. Like, it's like, who the hell is the backup quarterback, and do we trust them or not? Because obviously Mahomes isn't doing anything.
So it's the depth chart for the Chiefs is Mahomes, who's going to probably play a series. Chad Henne is the backup. Third string is former Texas Longhorn who once lost to Kansas. People forget that, Shane Buechele. And the fourth string is Mac and Maction legend Dustin Crum.
Wow. Shane Buechele.
You're right. I do know the Chiefs roster. That's part of my job.
Chad Henne. Like, the fact that Chad Henne's still getting reps, 37 years young. Big fan of that. I'm going to say the Packers win. I think the Niners team they played is a really good preseason team. They got a bunch of running backs that can run the rock. They, guys that fly around on defense, offensive line that can carry. Like, it's just, you're kind of set up for some success there, to be honest. Chiefs, I think they're a really top heavy team when it comes to talent. you talked about that a couple of episodes ago about when Jaron Reed played there, and just like that defense, the way it's always been structured. I feel like it's been that way for years under Andy Reid. It's just a little bit underutilized, or not even utilized is the wrong word. A little bit under just like given assets to. Like I feel like they don't really ever get a ton of stars. Like they get guys here and there. I mean, Tyrann Mathieu was there last year. That's great and all, but like I just feel like it's just tough to slow down the rock. And I mean, maybe they have a bunch of guys that are trying to grit it out and be a second or third string guy, but I'll take the Packers. And I'll even take the Packers to FanDuel's got it at -3. I think you said there's a couple different spreads there. I'll take Packers -3. Why not?
I will go Packers 19 and Chiefs 18. You're right. I mean, the Chiefs' first team and second team have actually played really well in the preseason so far, because it's the team that actually plays their starters. Patrick Mahomes has been out there. He threw, 18 or I think it was 12 of 18 or 12 of 19 in the game the other day. I mean, he played a lot in that contest. So I think it's going to be a lot of the Chiefs out there trying to get some reps in. Their end of bench has not done a whole lot. The Packers are coming off their first preseason win since 2019. So give me Packers by 1. That is not going to be enough to cover, but it's the preseason. And once again, it's the last time I will tell you this, because it's before the final preseason game. I am begging you, do not gamble on NFL preseason football. That is going to do it for Significant to Some, and that is going to do it for the Final Dump this week. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the show. The final preseason game is coming up this Thursday. We can't wait to break it all down with you coming up on next Monday's show. We go live every Monday night at 8 o'clock Lambeau time on the Game On Wisconsin YouTube channel, Twitter account, and Facebook page. So follow Game On Wisconsin on all of those different social medias. You can follow Matt on Twitter at Matt_FRA_, and you can follow myself, Brendan, on Twitter at BrendanDZW. Matt, good to have the two-man power trip back this week. Looking forward to one last preseason game, and then after that, we're gearing up for the regular season. Can't wait.
Fantastic to be back. Preseason game Thursday night. Super geeked for that. Nice not have it on Friday night. 'Cause I don't mind watching a preseason game on Friday night, but it's tough to pay attention to. There's other stuff going on. But yeah, we're gearing up, man. I'm pumped to be back. It was a great episode with you, and we are damn near. I mean, we're going to be talking about finalizing a roster in a week, so I'm pretty stoked about that.
We will preview what the final 53 will look like. We'll get to all the news and notes coming up next week on The Final Dump. For Matt Freilich, I'm Brendan Dworzinski. You've been listening to The Final Dump, brought to you by Game On Wisconsin.
Well, Wayne, I think this is one that Vince Lombardi and George Hallis would be proud of.
You could have given me a touchdown. Then it's hard to overturn. You know what I mean?
I understand.
That was a good effort, though, wasn't it? It's a pretty good effort.